In this video, I'm going to talk about how I sold $794,063.28 on Amazon last year in 2023. So obviously that's not all complete profit, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But basically, I sell on Amazon. I have sold FBA and FBM. Basically, FBA is where they fulfill items for you, and FBM is where the merchant fulfills the items as well. So I've done both business models. I have been reselling since around 2019, where I started selling used clothing on Depop and eBay. And at the very start, I was really bad at this. I literally didn't know what I was doing. I'd have to spend hours figuring out how to even ship items, how to list items. I would be really slow. I'd have lots of things go wrong. And so it really wasn't efficient at the start. And I wasn't making a ton of money at the start. But eventually I was able to figure it out. And I was able to make a solid part-time income while I was in school, while I was selling on eBay. And then at that point, I took a little bit of a leave of absence because of the pandemic, quit my internship, and actually figured out I was able to take this to a full-time level. And I ended up adding Amazon FBA books on the side to that as well, and eventually transitioned completely into Amazon FBA books. And so doing used books to figure out Amazon was really, really helpful for me, because you literally just had to figure out, okay, how do I ship these books to Amazon, and how do I find these books? And you kind of did the same process for every single book. There wasn't, how do I figure out grocery expiration dates, and like, how do I get engaged in a bunch of stuff? Like, no, I just sold books, and that was that. And that worked out pretty good. But eventually I decided to start making a switch to retail and online arbitrage. So basically those are where you buy either items from a store, retail arbitrage, to sell on Amazon for a higher price, or buying items online arbitrage, to sell for a higher price on Amazon to make a profit. And so at the very beginning, kind of like the eBay, I had no clue how I was ever going to buy something online to actually make a profit. I think my first attempt of that was back when I was doing eBay, and I sold a pretty high-end sweater for like $70, and I decided to try to recreate that, but buy it at more like $40, $50 and sell for $70. And it did not work out well. I think I ended up losing like $25, and it sat for like 5 months. That was my first experience with online arbitrage, but eventually, after you put in some reps, get some better education around it, it's actually very doable, and you can do this at a lot higher scale than you can do just thrifting used items or used books to sell on eBay or Amazon. So after doing retail and online arbitrage for a while, I stumbled on some items when I was cleaning out an office that were vintage and extremely fast selling and high priced. They were some office products. They were thermal printers, and these thermal printers sold almost immediately. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I get more of these? And eBay was the place where I was actually able to find more of these. And I knew that I sold them at the price that I sold them at. So I was like, oh wow, if they're half price on eBay, like, why can't I buy these on eBay and sell them on Amazon? So that's what I did. That's how I got started with eBay to Amazon online arbitrage. That's kind of how I continued. I eventually transitioned into other types of items and ended up doing that and really taking that a lot further than my used books or retail or online arbitrage before had taken me. So when I got started with eBay to Amazon, I was doing completely used items. But eventually, I ended up switching to doing new items. In 2023, that's kind of when I had completely transitioned over to doing a majority of my items as new. And in 2023, I sold $796,000 on Amazon, which I'm super, super excited about. Obviously, not all of that is profit, but we'll talk about that in a second. So $794,000 in sales ends up coming out to around $65,000 a month. The way that it worked out was at the beginning of the year, it was more in the 40 to 50 range. And at the end of the year, it was more in the 70, 80, 90K range. With December, I ended up doing 108K, if I remember right. So the end of the year was a lot better, and I kind of learned a lot more over time and was able to put a lot more into practice and end up making a lot more money because of it. So cost of goods is a big thing that you have to consider in an online arbitrage business, and there's not going to be a straight black and white, everyone has this percentage cost of goods, but in my case, it ended up being 42% of my revenue was cost of goods this year, which comes out to $334,000 of cost of goods. very basically, if you don't know what cost of goods are, is let's say I buy an item for $100 and I sell it for $150. Let's say there's $20 in fees and I am given back by Amazon $130. That would mean that I sold the item for $30 profit and my cost of goods was $100. $100 cost of goods, $30 profit, $150 sale price, and $20 in fees. With that, also my Amazon fees were a lot, because when you sell something, you're going to get hit with fees that you obviously have to calculate before you make purchases. If you're just going in there making purchases and not looking at a fee calculator, like something like Seller Amp or RevSeller, definitely do that. You're going to make a lot of mistakes if you don't do that. So one thing to think about with that cost of goods is a lot of people will be out there and say like, oh, just start Amazon. You can sell 7 figures in a year. Like you can right off the bat, you'll be successful. And honestly, in most cases, that's not true, because there's skills that you have to learn. And also, like my cost of goods, that's $334,000 in a year of cost of goods that you have to have in order to actually even do almost $800,000 in sales. And so if you split that up into 12 months, that's around $28,000 cost of goods per month. So obviously not all of my inventory sells within a month. I have to have a lot more than $28,000 of inventory in a single month. Especially if you're doing FBA, the cash flow cycle is a lot slower than you think it was. It's not like you just have your $30,000 that you're just rotating. Like, no, there's a 2-week payout. There is 1 to 6 weeks of inbound time to FBA. There's FC transfers. And so you really do need a lot of money in order to actually sell a ton on Amazon. So you definitely have to keep that in mind and either have a lot of credit that you're using towards inventory or just have money that you're willing to put into this business. And then also with that, I also have other external expenses like paying for virtual assistants to help me find inventory. There's software. A lot of these items do get broken, so I have to write those off as expenses. There's just a lot of other things that go into running an Amazon store that actually sells a lot of products, because things are not always going to go exactly how you think they are. That's just how running a store works. So there's a lot of other expenses that go into running a store like this. After all of the external expenses, cost of goods, Amazon fees, etc., my end of the year profit for 2023 was $174,000, which I'm super stoked about. And so if you divide that by 12, that ends up being around $14,500 in profit every single month. Super excited about that. I've improved a ton. At the very beginning, I was having to walk over to the library to print a printing label in order to ship my items out. And I'd be like, wow, if I could only have a sale every single day, that would be amazing. And like, things have exponentially grown from there, and this has been something that I've been working on extremely hard for over 4 years at this point. But also, I have a lot more that I can grow in. There's so much more that I could do better. Really, however you can find a way to put more potential profit into your business in a smaller amount of time equals you making more money in the long run. So that's the grind that I've been on for the last several years. Is I've been trying to track how long does it take for me to list an item? How long does it take for me to ship an item? How long does it take for me to source an item? Where is my time going and how can I make this more efficient? And so that's really what you got to do if you're wanting to make a lot of money with reselling. At the very beginning, you're going to be absolutely grinding and you're not going to have a clue what you're doing. You might make $3, $4, $5 an hour for a long time, but the improvements have to be made over time, and it really does catapult at a certain point. The thing is a lot of people will go to college and pay thousands and thousands of dollars and go in debt for 4 years in order to make $50,000 a year or whatever it is. People aren't willing to spend several years working and not making that much money in order to actually make a full-time income doing something like reselling. This really isn't the type of thing where you're just going to work relatively hard 15 hours a week for 8 months and suddenly make a full-time income. Like, that's not really how competitive skills work. It is a competitive space. There's a lot of sellers on Amazon. You do need to continue growing and getting better year over year because things do get more competitive. But if you are in that space where you're doing things extremely well, there's a ton of money to be made and you just have to continue improving over time.